Okay, welcome to the workshop. Um, I recently saw a TV documentary wherein where parents were recording their children, and one of the popular things seems to be that you give your child a toy and they're going to unpack it or unbox it and put it on YouTube. So since this is going to be on YouTube, I think we should start with unboxing, right? So I have a virtual machine here. Let's do it in full screen. I'm going to install Xsharp. And why do I do this? Because I want to show you what you get if you install. Some of you have installed it, others haven't. This machine has Visual Studio 2017. As you can see on the bottom, there's an icon for Visual Studio 2017. So I'm going to run the public installer, which is a little bit different from the installer for our subscribers because they get a bit more. They get a core version of the compiler and they get some debug versions of runtime assemblies, which you can create yourself too if you just recompile the code, but we give it to them because it's convenient. I'm going to go to the license. It's just the normal source code license, nothing special, but you can read it at home. You get your welcome message, a folder location, and at this page you can get to choose about all the options. And Xsharp has discovered that I have Visual Studio 2017, so it's going to integrate in 2017 if I want. We have some options which I suggest that you leave ticked unless you know what you're doing, but it optimizes the compiler and it registers the runtime in the GAG. And I think the only person on the world who doesn't register in the GAG is the developer himself. For you guys, leave that on. And you can install XIDE, which is the pet toy from our colleague Chris, which is nice, but it doesn't have FoxPro templates yet. I will complain. So it creates a start group, and then let's do it. And this doesn't take too long, except at the end of the process, we will have to install ourselves into Visual Studio, and then we are waiting for the Microsoft gods to accept us in their paradise, and then we are in Visual Studio. So this is now where we're waiting for Microsoft, and it's usually time to fill the cup that you got with a bit of coffee, and it's not that, or tea is also allowed because it, after all, was a cup of tea. And we'll have a look at what we get on our machine. So we install Xsharp in the program files folder, and over there you will find a lot of subfolders. The bin one, as the name suggests, has binaries, and this has the compiler. This is the main folder. It also has some other tools, but the biggest thing here is the compiler. The assemblies one contains assemblies that you will see if you do add reference in Visual Studio. So those are the ones that you normally include. If you choose a template, they will be in there. But if you want to do something extra that's not in the template, you can do add reference in Visual Studio. You will see Microsoft assemblies, but you will also see these. If you want to deploy your app, you look in Redist because it has the same assemblies, but a few more. Some of them you normally don't include in the reference list, so that's why they are not in the assemblies, but why they are in Redist. Now you see help. Well, you can imagine what it is. Some images, include our cover later, and you see some tools. And the XIDE installer is here, and our tool VO Exporter, which is a tool that we use when we develop for visual objects. And I'll show you that briefly because it gives you an idea of what we could do for FoxPro to help your code migrate. Okay. In the meantime, Microsoft has accepted us. We will not view the what's new. I recommend you to do view the what's new, but it's about 20 pages, I think, at the moment, so it's a bit much for now. And if we want, we can do the IDE installer. I don't do it now, just to give you an idea. So this is what you normally do, and this is what you normally get. Inside Visual Studio, then, you can recognize that we are installed at a few places because we are, even if you don't open a Visual Studio project for Xsharp, you can see us. We are in the help menu, and we could conveniently put our documentation in there. In the past, we integrated our help in the Visual Studio help that was installed locally, but Microsoft has decided to move all their help to the web, which is great. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to insert our help on their website. I don't know why, but it's not allowed. So we put ourselves in here for convenience. You will also see some tools in this menu that have the word X Sharp in it, and you will see if you do a new project, you will see that X Sharp is in the list. As you can see, we have separated our project into Windows, class libraries, and test. So this is what you'll see, and this tells you that the installation was successful. Oh yeah, and there's one more place. If you go to help about, if we ask you which version do you have, on the bottom line you will see you have the X Sharp Visual Studio Project System 281. This is actually what we call 28A, because we did some minor bug fixes to 28. Okay, let's get rid of this machine because now I want to go to the real thing. Shut it off. I'll regret that tomorrow, but I'm just shutting it off. Good. A little bit of background info about X Sharp and an overview of the runtime. And Fabrice is going to show you a lot of things. And what we're really interested in, what you guys want. So whenever you have a question, don't wait until the end. Ask the question. That's why we're here for. Okay. I've looked a bit at the folders. You've seen where the compiler is. The runtime is in the assembly and redist folder. And on top of that, we've moved the runtime in the global assembly cache, the GAC. As FoxPro developers, you probably don't know what the GAC is. I think over here in Rick's trial session it was mentioned, and when they do, but it's let's say a big database of assemblies. And whenever Windows doesn't know where to find something, it always looks in the GAC, which is nice, unless you have updated your assembly and there's an older version in the GAC, because it doesn't tell you, but it will not pick your new version. It will take the one from the GAC. So that's why you can choose not to install in the GAC. What you deploy is your code plus what's in the redist folder whenever you need it. Our documentation has a list of all the assemblies and what they are good for. Okay, and what I will do now is give you a brief introduction of a FoxPro console app. We did a bit of that in our session, but I want to show you a bit more and show you some of the features and how we implemented it. So let's go to Visual Studio. Now I'm doing, do I have it open? This one's closed. I have a project in console app and I'm using a customer DBF. Now, it's always the question, you guys know that, where is the DBF? How do I find it? Now, in this particular sample, I have a copy similar to what Fabrice did in the vendor session in the folder, and I have a button here in Visual Studio, and I'm showing you also some Visual Studio things on the fly, that you can show all files in the folder. So the ones that are there and included, but also the ones that are not included. And in this case, I would like to include my customer DBF. So I can click and it's in the folder. And in the properties window, you can tell it, Visual Studio, whenever I compile, do something with. Now, in this case, I don't want it to compile my DBF because I don't have something that knows how to compile. But what I do want is to copy to the output folder. And I'm telling it to copy always. As a result, whenever I compile, it will move the original copy of this DBF into the output folder. On the right-hand side, now I'm in the show all files, you can also see the folder structure. The default folder structure in Visual Studio is that it puts the binaries in a bin folder and the temporary files in an object folder. And Visual Studio can compile in debug and release mode. That's why there's a debug folder. And if I switch to release, Visual Studio will create a release folder, maybe when I build, but it will create it. And so you have two possible sets of binaries. Okay, that's enough for it. Let's just compile this. And see that it runs. We've seen it yesterday. Okay, this runs. So what was one of the biggest difference between FoxPro and the other languages, and Eric has mentioned it, we have mentioned, is that we are more function-based. We used to use functions, and you guys are more command-based. But that's just another way of doing the same thing. Now, what we had to do to make our language compatible is write some code that translates commands to functions. And I will want to briefly touch it so you guys have an idea what we're doing, and you can also use it to your advantage. So if you're missing something, like if you miss a set statement, well, write one. It's just 1-2 lines of code, and then it's there, and you can help us improve our include file, because this is driven by include files. In the installation, now I'm showing it on not on the virtual machine, but on my machine, where there's a bit more. You will find an include folder, and all apps will include xsharp devs xh, which is a header file. And as you can see here, we have a statement that says hash, what you call it, hashtag or pound command accept message to v, and this is translated to v equals accept message. So this is like a kind of string tran to the max with regular expressions and stuff like that. So this is what we're using. Now, it's easy to make a mistake in these things. I know, because I've made the mistakes. So when you do something like this and you want to see what the compiler has done with your command, and this can help you and us debugging things, go to the properties of the application. There are several ways to bring the dialog. I'll show you 2 or 3 of them. One is in the project menu. The other is over here, workshop properties. And the third one is open on the properties window. They all go to the same dialog for the project properties. There's lots of settings here. The most one will be set by us. By default, you can override anything. And if you know what you're doing, do it. If you don't know what you're doing, leave it the way we provide it. The one thing that you could do is say, I want to see what the preprocessor has done with my code. And that's an option on the build page that says generate preprocessor output. If you enable that and rebuild, and I have to refresh this list, you will see an extra file appearing. And this extra file is called PPO. And those of you who've used Clipper have seen similar things. And what you can see now is, I should be able to drag this, that this is not keyword colored. We could do that, Fabrice, keyword color the PPO files. It wouldn't be too difficult. But as you can see, the use command has been translated to db use area, and then a false because it doesn't want a new area. It's going to use it in the current area, the name of the file. This is a bit strange, if false or false, not false. This is something to do with shared and exclusive. And you can see that the scan command is actually translated to if false, db locate, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, db locate true. Actually, so it means what this does is say if there's a for condition, you do it with the for condition, and otherwise you give it a logical true as a for condition, which is always true. So that's what you want if you do not do a for condition. And as you can see, this just translates down in a do while found. And then we do the last name and we db continue and do. So this is the magic that we're doing with user-defined commands. Now, if we missed a FoxPro command and it's something that you desperately need, you can create your own command, put it in a header file, and you don't have to wait until we have finished that. I'll show you one example because I would like to create an index on this file. Now, of course, you don't do that every time, but I want to do it right now. So what I would like to do is index on last name, tag last name. This is FoxPro, right? But notice, it doesn't compile. Unexpected input on. Why doesn't it compile? Because Robert hasn't found the type to implement it. However, it's a no-brainer if you know the functions to do it yourself. So I'm going to drag in a command in my source here. You see index on. Now what these less than greater than characters mean, this is like a token basically. Tag ort name, A token between parentheses means that it could be a literal, but it could also be a variable, but then you have to pass it within parentheses. So we know not to take the name of the variable as a tag name, but the contents of the variable, etc., etc. And this results in an order create of the name, of the order name, key, etc. Key here is twice, one as a string, once as a code block. A code block is a special kind of lambda expression which was introduced in Clipper, which we have taken over in our language. And as you also can see, is while I was talking, the editor did its work, and the word tag turned from black to blue. So to prove that, I'm going to change this, and it gets black, and I'm going to make it index again, and it's blue. So our IntelliSense not just knows the built-in keywords, but it's smart enough to also recognize keywords that are apart from user-defined commands. Now, I think that's cool, because now I immediately see when I made a typo. And if I compile this, it does compile, and in the PPO, you will see that it does an order create, and somehow it's magically translates the original source into this. Now, I think this is because this can help you guys get started. And there's many set commands that we still have to do. We need to document them. We need to write them. If anyone wants to help us there, go ahead. If you need help in the syntax, yes, let us know. Yes, you have to enable the generate preprocessor output option. Yeah, good. So this actually shows us that by something that we've built in already, because people in Harbor use this, the Clipper people do, visual objects, helps us to make the language ready for FoxPro. And I think that's a powerful feature. What I also want to show you here, if you're ever going to present, don't type during the session. You type at home, and you drag it to the toolbar, and you can drag just the source in your editor. Saves you lots of embarrassing typos. Okay. Yeah. One more thing. No, not just one more thing. It sounds like I'm almost finished. What the template has done is has included references. So this is something, if you start with XID, you will not get, but we put the references in there. So we put the reference into X# core, a reference to X# RT, and a reference to X# VFP. And these are the files needed by a project in FoxPro dialect. And they contain functions like this order create function and the dbuse area functions. They contain classes, etc. They contain support that's needed to open a DBF. And if you look in the output folder, so in the bin folder, I should be able to open it. The file explorer, you will see that indeed core, RT, and VFP are copied here. What you do not see is X# RDD, but it is used. But this is not a reference in our project, so Visual Studio didn't copy it. But because X# RDD is in the global assembly cache, we find it. What you also do not see is another component that we call the macro compiler, which we need when you open the index with the DBF. It has to evaluate what is this last name. Is this a field? Is it a variable, etc.? So it knows how to generate index keys if you update or insert or delete a record. Okay, so Visual Studio compiles it in this folder. You see here the stuff that was referenced. You do not see the stuff that was not referenced. If you copy this over to the Linux machine, like Dries did in his session, it won't run because the RDD component is missing. So that's something to be aware of. If you're going to deploy stuff, look into the help file what you need to deploy. Okay. So you see it as reference to X# Core, RT, and Visual FoxPro. Commands to functions I've shown. So we translate commands to functions. So skip gets translated to dbskip, and skip n gets translated to dbskip n. And in the other one, the first one, we just put in 1 as a default number. Yeah. Okay. The bin folder. I know what I was at on the PowerPoint. I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh yeah, one more look at this bin folder to give you an idea what we're doing. If you, I would say this is not for the beginning developer, but if you're a bit more advanced, one tool that is really nice to have is called ILSpy. And it sounds a bit creepy, it sounds a bit 007, but it's not. It's just a tool that allows you to look at source code in its compiled form. So what I can do is I can take this workshop exe and drag it onto ILSpy or use a file open dialog, but I think drag and drop is way cooler. And as you can see, you can look into the generated code. And you can see there's a method here called start in the class called functions. That doesn't know functions. So what we have done is we've morphed your code into something that .NET likes. So we have generated by the compiler a functions class. And as you can see here on the right hand side, it says compiler generated. That's because the compiler generated it. And in this class, we put your start function and we call it method start, or in C# terms, public static void start. Actually, what we generated with the help from our friends from Microsoft is this. You won't like this. Even I don't like this, but sometimes we have to look at this because we do make an error. This is much more friendly. But wouldn't it be nice if you could look into something in H# syntax, right? Even if it's not our code. Yeah, then you have to call Fabrice. So now I'm stealing Fabrice's talk because, Fabrice, we're getting an error.
Okay.
Oh, normally this should show you the same source and probably he has a better version than I have. I'm always behind one version. I think I've updated ILSpy and it's now broken.
So if you want to specify what you have to do is search either you can go from a page to the GitHub repository, which is called ILSpy add-in, or else simply you search for ILSpy.net. From there you can download their tool, install it, and then it is able to show you the code in only the C# way. If you go on our website, you are able to download the binary version of our tool, which is a simple DLL, and you just have to copy paste that DLL inside the ILSpy.exe. And when you restart ILSpy, GitHub will appear in the folder list.
And it does.
So
As you can see in this code, we've added a bit. We have asked the compiler to add a few things. So we put a try catch, a try finally in there. We are doing something which I don't want to bother you with an app init and app exit, but this has to do with init and exit procedures that I mentioned. And in the finally, we call the garbage collector and we wait for pending finalizers. So, for example, any open work areas will then be closed in a normal way, and we only exit the app if all the destructors, let's say all the code that runs it shut down for DB serve or DBF work areas is run. So we morph your code into something that C# uses. And but the nice thing is that you can also look at, for example, this is also our code, but if you were to look in Microsoft's code, it's all there. In .NET, there are no secrets anymore. Also, a weakness of .NET. If you have really company secrets, you need to do something to hide them. You can either put them in something that's unmanaged, or you need to use a tool. So there are tools that can obfuscate your code and help you hide secrets. But you have the same problem with FoxPro because you have a FoxPro app and someone comes with ReFox and all your good stuff is visible. So there's not really a difference. It's a difference for C++ programmers, but not for FoxPro programmers. Okay. I'm almost there that you can have the mic. A few things about the runtime. We've already seen a couple of DLLs. The important one is X# core, which contains you always, if you do something that requires left and right functions, stuff like that, you use X# core. X# core works for all dialects, but it does not have an array or a date or any of the other typical X-based things, or a dir function, or it does have question mark support. So that but we just map that to terminal output. On top of that, we have an X-sharp RT assembly, which adds common X-based types, such as date and array that I mentioned. But it also has functions to do that can skip parameters. So if we are used to that you can call a function and skip parameters, or you do not pass a command option. That's normally not allowed in .NET Core, but it is allowed in X-Base. So that's in this assembly. And on top of that, we have a FoxPro, a VO, XPP assembly that contains things that are only relevant for these dialects. There are two other assemblies in this list, the X-Sharp macrocompiler and the X-Sharp RDD that you normally do not reference, but if you use them, they have to be in your folder or in the GAC. And one of them is the macrocompiler, which is used to compile strings into pieces of code that can be executed at runtime, so we do not have to, like FoxPro creates P code and interprets that. We do not want a P code interpreter, so we do have it because the P code in .NET is called IL, but we generate methods from that, what's called dynamic methods. The macrocompiler does that. I have no idea how it works. We have a genius in Greece who has created this. Actually, I do know how it works, but that's Nikos' territory. Just as the compiler, 90% of in there is Nikos' territory. The RDD contains not just one RDD, but it contains all our RDDs. So DBF VFP, which is the FoxPro driver, it contains DBF CDX, which is the old FoxPro 2.6 version. So it's only the standard types, but it does support CDX and FPT. We have NTX. We have 3 or 4 versions of Advantage in there. In the not too far future, we will put support for SDF, so append from SDF and append from delimiters that will go in there, and we may add others. I've heard someone say that there is a rumor that there could be other RDDs in there too. I don't know where he got the rumor, but I'm always in for rumors because it's fun, right? Okay. I will skip all of this because you're gonna get the slides and I don't want to bore you with slides. One of the things is we try to be good .NET citizens. So we do not use Win32 API unless we really, really, really have to. So we do not use the create file API from Win32 because if we do, then it doesn't run on .NET Core, it doesn't run on Linux in mono. So we use .NET file streams everywhere, or streams in general. However, also in our X-based language, we are used to work with file handles. So you have an fopen that returns, I think in FoxPro, a number. In Visual Objects returns a pointer, which is just also a number because it was not really a pointer into memory where you could write, but it was just a unique identifier. What we have done is, if these functions still exist, but internally they use .NET managed file streams. And because we did that, we could just drag the code onto Linux and get it to run, because I have no idea if Linux uses file handlers, probably, but they could also be something completely different. I don't care. There could be midgets there that take our information and scribble it down. As long as it has a stream interface and it's fast, I think that's great. So that's what we've done. Those things, and file handlers is not the only thing. Also in Visual Objects, you can allocate memory. Use the same thing. We use the managed API to do that, and we pseudo give you a handle. So what you get is not the real Win32 file handle. So don't take the handle and call a function in kernel and pass it to handle to read the block from the disk, because it'll fail. It is not a handle. What we've also done is created something that C# developers don't like. Our runtime has state, global state, because Xbase has global state. We have a current setting for set deleted. We have a current setting for set exact. you name it, the date format. We have current work areas. What we've done, we have that in a state object, but the state object is prepared for multi-threading. So if you start a new thread, it will inherit the state from the main thread, except for the work areas, and it will, if you change something in the thread, it will not break the main thread. So we try to do it in a way that even if you do something stupid in the thread, you said, for example, we switch deleted flag, it will not be changed in the main thread. And that's similar to the data session from FoxPro. So since we have separate sets of tables at this moment in several threads, we can do the same with data sessions in FoxPro. That's not implemented. It is on our to-do list, and we know you guys need it. Good. I'm going to skip this. Well, you can see we have member support, public privates. We hope we've done it right, but there is a chance we made a mistake. Let us know if you find something. Use the bug template that Art is going to prepare. That's what you said, right, Art? You're going to prepare a bug template. Yeah. The VFP contains FoxPro specific things. At the moment, it's support for text and text, the backslash, double backslash to also do the text and text kind of thing on a single line. It has the system variables, at least the ones that we use at the moment. Not all of them are in there yet. Some of them will never get in there because they are inherited from FoxPro 2.6 and have to do with 25 by 80 screens. I don't think it's useful to keep those. It has the classes such as custom and collection, and there will be more classes in there. It has FoxPro specific functions. So I thought you guys have just file and just extension and stuff like that. That's going to go in the FoxPro DLL. And those will usually be just one-liners because of course, there's support in the framework for that. So we will not write it. Our philosophy is don't write it if someone smarter has already written it. So now there may be a chance that someone smarter thinks that the extension should be returned with the dot and FoxPro returns it without the dot. So it could be that we make a mistake there. Please forgive us because we are only using someone else's code in that area, and then we'll just fix it. Gonna skip this. Yeah. I think it's time that Fabrice takes the screen. You want to cover forms? No, you haven't. It's not finished, so you haven't. One thing about Windows Forms, Microsoft has told the community, forget about Windows Forms. It's dead, and it was visible because they didn't touch it anymore. They fixed bugs, but that's it. Just like the last few years in the life of FoxPro, they fixed bugs, but the dev team was already moved to somewhere else. We all had to go WPF. Well, the community has decided otherwise. .NET Core supports WinForms and WPF. So we think that the way forward for FoxPro guys is WinForms, and that's why we also fully support WinForms in our project. But it's not in one of those runtime assemblies. We use WinForms just the way they are, and I think that's good because if we get you guys on top of WinForms and we're not going to write a complete new FoxPro form hierarchy, then everything that's on the market for WinForms, including all the good controls from all the third-party vendors, will be available for you guys. So I think, therefore, it's a good decision to move to WinForms and WPF. Okay, now Fabrice, it's your turn. So I'll give over the cable. I hope nothing breaks. So it's still recording.